say that Manchester United has lost money for the last 7 years, and it's something like in the last 4 years alone, it's lost 330 million pounds.
It's horrific.
That's a third of £1 billion in the last 4 years. During that period of time, he's been recruiting lots of new people, on top of a workforce which was already enormous. So, we finished up with 1,150 people. We've increased the cost base of running. So if you look at a couple of really simple numbers, in the last 7 years, since 2016, we increased the cost of running the club, which are the operating costs of running the club, so just the people and the fixed costs, if you like. So all the costs, excluding the player costs, we increased the cost by £100 million in the last 7 years, since 16. And
welcome back to the Football Terrace. A big interview between Neville and Sir Jim Ratcliffe has been released. Also one with the BBC. We're going to feature some of it for you. We want to get your views and get your opinions on this. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you are subscribing. Get that bell notification turned on as well. As Sir Jim was just explaining, and we're going to get back to it, every year for the last 7 years, Manchester United have been losing money. But in that period, the people running the club, and if you watch the full interview, he speaks about how the Glazers aren't hands-on per se, that they've trusted management, Ed Woodward, etc., Richard Arnold to run the club. But we're losing money every year. But what they have done is continue to employ more and more and more and more people year in, year out, raising the operating costs of the football club. But continue listening. It's absolutely infuriating.
In the last 7 years, since 16. And the player salary bill increased by £100 million. So that went from 150 to 250, this went from 170 to 270. And in that period of time, the top line, the revenue, increased by only £100 million.
So you increase your operating costs by 200 million, but you only increase the revenue by 100 million. Now, I am so sad to see so many people lose their job. What's also been revealed, though, is that there was someone, as an example, being paid £175,000 a year as a body language consultant by the football club. As an example. But the club's revenues have been raising by 100 million a year. But we were losing money and we continued to employ people. And it was a gut feeling that I had that, yes, it's horrible to make the majority of people that have lost their jobs redundant. But my focus was, how do we get to this point more so than the remedy for it? Imagine that. Revenues go up by 100 million and we increase our costs by 200 million. Meaning, even though our revenue's growing, we're losing an extra £100 million a year.
So £170 million deficit.
So you just finish up with a situation which is on television. It doesn't work. If every year you spend more money than you earn, ultimately that's the road to ruin. And unfortunately, and it's not until we mentioned it a couple of times today, it's not known, Manchester United would have run out of money at the end of this year. November this year, the club runs out of cash.
Now, a lot of people will react to this and say, well, Sir Jim should never have bought a part of the club. We should have allowed the Glazers to run out of money. It would have forced a full sale. Debt would have been paid. The club would have been okay. In principle, I know why people believe this. But this is a 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 or 9 billion pound asset that the Glazers own. If anybody really believes, say there's no Sir Jim, there's no Ineos, there's no Barada, none of that's happened. We just continued, by the way, to operate the way we did. All that would have happened is the Glazers would have pumped some more cash into the club. Now, there is a train of thought that a good owner would have come along and bought us and would have saved us from that mess. But there are no guarantees of that happening. But the likelihood is the Glazers would have pumped some money in, ended up making these cost-cutting measures themselves anyway because they would have seen their asset was at risk. But the idea that Sir Jim has just stopped the full sale from happening. I just don't buy into this theory. I get why people say it and do it. But the fundamental facts are United cannot continue to spend more money than we bring in. The wage bill of the players has been reduced massively. We're going to go on to him talking about that in a few moments. We've seen that wage bill reduced on a very, very big level, and that was massively important. But multiple other areas have had to have their costs reduced as well. Now, this clip here talks a little bit more about the Ten Hag situation. We're going to get back to the players in a moment. Take a little listen to this, because this is one of the biggest elements that Ineos and Sir Jim have been called out for.
Final success. Because you were looking around Europe and scouring for a new manager.
It was too early for us to make a big decision in reality, and we hadn't been together as a team for very long. You know, if you look at Omar, Jason, myself, Dave, we hadn't been together for very long. It was just a matter of, weeks, and it's quite a big decision, isn't it? And also, it's quite difficult to, I couldn't. It was quite difficult to extract in that season when we arrived Erik's performance from the structure around him. Because obviously the structure around him now is completely different.
Yeah.
So if I look today, there's a really strong relationship and a really strong support culture for Ruben with Jason. So Jason and Ruben talk to each other 2 or 3 times a day. Omar speaks to Ruben every day. Every time I go to the match, I speak to Ruben. So, there's a support structure there, and he's got his coaches and the physios and the doctor and everything else. But it was quite difficult to see whether, what environment Erik was operating in. Was it, in other words, was the erratic performance a function of Erik, or was it a function of the organisation? And we couldn't really get to the bottom of answering that question with sort of certainty, I suppose. So we gave Erik the benefit of the doubt.
It goes on just after that, Sir Jim, to say that there was mitigating circumstances, but they hold their hands up and they have made a mistake there. And I like the honesty. I like the forthrightness. We've complained that the Glazers for years haven't spoke to us. Now it's about rectifying that mistake. Now, of course, we haven't seen a mass change on the football pitch. That's because everything that we're doing right now should have been done in pre-season. We should have bought maybe some different players that would have helped Ruben out more than Ten Hag. And we're now playing catch-up because of a mistake that Ineos have held their hands up to. Their rationale, I understand it. I get it. They just weren't sure whether Ten Hag was the issue or whether the structure around him was a problem. They gave Ten Hag the benefit of the doubt. That was the mistake, and a lot of us called it out at the time. But they've held their hands up now and they've admitted that. They speak about the structure being a lot better. And this is also a positive thing. You may not believe it, and that's fair, and I understand it. But they've now told us the relationship's working really well, the structure is good. So it means once a pre-season has happened and a whole summer transfer window, we now must expect and demand to see month in, month out, that exponential growth of this team, better performances and better wins. The chaos has gone. A better coach with a better structure and relationship around him is there. That enables us as fans to truly assess the growth and or the problems in a better way. But what is really nice to see is the owners communicating with us and admitting their faults and their mistakes. We have lacked that at the club for the better part of 20 years. Up next, let's take a look at what Sir Jim has said on the BBC about the current squad. I'd love to get your opinions on this. Remember to hit the like button and to share this so we can really see what the Football Terrace community and wider individuals think. Let's take a little listen here.
Buying Anthony, we're buying Casemiro, we're buying Onana, we're buying Højlund, we're buying Sancho. These are all things from the past, but whether we like it or not, we've inherited those things, so we have to sort that out. So, for Sancho, who now obviously plays for Chelsea and we pay half his wages, we're paying £17 million to buy in the summer. So it takes time for us to move away from the past into a new place in the future.
So obviously giving examples here of players that Man United fans have been highly critical of and explaining he understands that fans are going to hold them accountable for the current state of the squad. but also reiterating it's going to take time to undo the mistakes. Sancho is no longer a Man United player, is going to be a Chelsea player. We've still got £17 million of pay of the transfer that we owe on him. So the mistakes of the past, the poor recruitment, the inability to get the right loan moves and then generate the sale for the last 2 or 3 years, which is when it should have happened really, has led to, again, more financial problems. We know with Anthony as a case in point, he was a £25 million player we spent £90 million on. With hindsight, should we really have invested so much in the salary and the transfer of an aging Casemiro against a younger, more sustainable player? These things can't all be levelled at Ineos. And I do think one area that I have defended them on many times is I think we have to be fair in terms of giving them time to fix 12 years of transfer malpractice.
Were you saying that those players aren't good enough for United?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that we've...
Or overpaid, or what are you getting at there?
Well, some are not good enough. Some probably are overpaid. But for us to mould the squad that we are fully responsible for and accountable for will take time.
I agree completely with Sir Jim in that particular point. I don't hold them accountable for how their squad looks today. But in 2 or 3 summers' time, I absolutely will. I think what's also really key here for me, and I think it shows why there's been a little bit of a resistance to Ineos and to Amorim, is these players are being told straight. If you ain't performing at the right level, giving the right energy, behaving in the correct way, you will be gone. And I think a lot of, and excuse the pun here, it's not meant to sound bad, but a lot of them are realising their free lunch is over. They can't just, I'm on 200 grand a week at Man United. It's 100 grand a week more than any other club offered me. And I'm not even having to deliver to the best of my ability to get it. Those days are gone. The problem is, and I know a lot of United fans wanted it fixed instantly, that was never going to happen. Never going to happen in a million years. So in terms of the player element there, again, I agree with a lot of what he said. But an area that's been a very big bone of contention has been the lunches, etc., taken away from fans. Let's take a listen to this part of the interview. I think it's massive before we go to our conclusions.
And it's having to cut £40,000 from ex-players and now removing food from members of staff in the canteen. I mean,
but the alternative isn't very tenable, is it? Which is the club goes bust at Christmas. We don't want that.
No, absolutely.
We don't want that.
No, we absolutely don't want that. But we also have to...
Very quickly on this, I want to address this. So some people will say they're billionaires, pump money in. It's not doable for the club. They can't just pump as much money into the club as they want when they're sailing close to the PSR, FFP sun, as it were, because that is just offset. So the club has to be sustainable within itself. They have to make cuts. They can't just pump money in and pay down the debt or give free food to staff. All of that is offset from a PSR perspective. They have to make literal savings. So as much as I would love to see them be able to do that, the rules state they can't.
I think make decisions in light of sort of the impact that they're going to have, because United, as you know, you're a fan, has a soul, it has a heart, and I think when it comes to food and Manchester United staff being fed, the idea of me eating differently than my compatriots who are in the office, the kitmen, the groundsmen, the people who are, to be fair, the sort of my friends at the club, because I was in there for 25 years, I find that difficult from an inequality perspective.
I understand where Gary's coming from here. Before Sir Jim responds, but players don't have a problem with the inequality of their earnings compared to those individuals. But they do in this circumstance. I'm intrigued to see if you see a difference in that, or if you agree with Gary Neville. I'd love to get your opinions on that, people.
However, I mean, I get that, Gary, and I understand that, but it's... You have to deal with. We can't put our head in the sand. We have to deal with the problem, and it's a big problem, not a small problem, because the numbers I've given you, I've just given you, they're big numbers. They're not small. These are not.
They're horrific.
Not penny numbers, and as you say, this is the biggest club in the world. And if it just goes on year after year after year, what happens if you spend more money than you earn? Is every year you have to go to the bank and borrow more money. So I know.
Is that one of the problems?
I know that's how you feel about lunches, but we have to go to the bank down the road and we have to borrow the money to give everybody a free lunch. 95% of people in the UK don't get a free lunch. I don't get a free lunch. I've never had a free lunch. Nobody else gets a free lunch. And the vast majority of people don't get a free lunch. It's a nice perk if you get one, but in the modern world, most people don't get a free lunch. And at the moment, Manchester United can't afford to give people free lunches because they have to go to the bank and borrow it. And I don't think. And at the end of the day, it's fans' money, isn't it?
It's really interesting, this, because he's absolutely right. If you're spending more money than you're making, you have to borrow more money. And none of us want more debt. I know another challenge will be, but they've just spent money bringing in Dan Ashworth and then sacked him, and it's waste of money. That could have been used to feed staff. And I understand that. But you've also got to look at how big organisations are structured. Every department will have an income and a cost. And they'll have to work within that budget and that restraint. The men's first team, in terms of expenditure, there'll be a much higher tolerance for loss because of the revenue the men's team brings in. The majority of fans buying shirts, buying tickets, spending money on TV subscriptions. The majority of that is done to watch the men's team play. So there's a much higher tolerance for losses in the first team, or the direct management, building, running, and being the architect of that team, as there would be compared to the handymen and caretakers of the ground, as an example. The canteen, a much smaller budget. And you have to compartmentalise a business in that way. It isn't sustainable to sort of rob from Peter to pay Paul. I think for me, and Gary Neville does allude to this in the full interview, to go watch it, are they going to bring some of these perks back? Are they going to continue to operate in this way forever? Sir Jim has suggested no. As and when things improve, perks and benefits will be given back. I understand a lot of people are going to scrutinise and still be very, very cautious and sceptical of Ineos and the way they're running the football club. And I understand it, and I'm not overly disagreeing with you. I'm not overly disagreeing, entitled to the opinion. But for me, we should not lose sight of why we're in this situation. Go back to listen to the first part of this video. Our revenue is slowly increasing, but we're growing our expenditure, employing more and more people that we didn't need and we couldn't afford. This was always going to happen. It was an inevitability. It doesn't matter now, by the way, if we had a multi-billionaire owner who is willing to pump in as much money as possible. That wouldn't necessarily fix this problem. The Glazers will never sell the club if paying the debt off is part of the purchase, because that means they don't get that money. If a billionaire buys the club off the Glazers and the debt's still there, even if that billionaire wipes the debt off, that is still offset against the profit and loss accounts. So yes, we'd have an extra 50, 60 to 100 million a year that we're not spending on bank debt. But that would all be offset when it comes to the FFP and PSR, meaning you'd still have to make cuts around the football club because the operating element of the club, the operating costs were too high. And this is why Man United fans, I think we should be frustrated. I think there should be a level of anger. But at the same time, what's the solution? Because I still can't think of one outside of making these cuts. Now, we know that the manager's got to do a better job on the pitch. The players have got to perform. We've got to finish higher in the league. We've got to try to win more trophies, because that all generates prize money, bigger sponsorships, which can help this. But I'd love to get your opinion on this. There's a link below for the full interview. Go and listen to it. I think it's very, very eye-opening, to say the least. There's a lot that they've got to do to fix this club. I'm not happy with all their decisions, the redundancies, the free lunches. Of course, I'm not happy about the taking away money from the ex-player charities. And a lot of that is called out in this interview, so go and have a look. But if you're angry and frustrated with it, what are your solutions? Genuinely, what's the solutions in your personal opinion? Hit the like and the share button. Make sure you're subscribing, and we'll see you all again soon.